What's goody, guys? We back with another video. So today we are reviewing Will's book. Let's just admire the art. I gave this book 4.5 stars. I really enjoyed the book. The book provided great insight to Will Smith's life, who he is, who he wants to be, who he was, with his family, his children, the reason why he does the things that he do. He acts the way that he acts. And I thought it was very, for the most part, it's entertaining, but it was educational for me. Just to get an understanding of one of the actors that I enjoy watching on my TV, right? And you know, this book provide insight on to the controversy stuff that he just recently did. And I was just like, okay, I'm understanding in a way why the reaction was the way it was. But I'm just like, you know, if you want to get an insight on who he is, I would suggest reading the book. I heard the audio version is much better because he's narrating it. The narration in the book keeps you hooked, so I could just imagine the audio to his book. But I enjoyed the read, right? I'm going to start by saying this. I truly thought that The Fresh Prince was based off Will Smith's life. Boy, was I wrong. The show itself is based off of a man named Benny Medina's life, and Will Smith was just playing. And they used his name because, you know, your name is what gets you attention. It makes it more real, right? But anyways, let's just jump right into it. You already know I have my notes. So Will Smith, he grew up in a two-parent household, right? His father was an authoritarian figure, so his father served in the military, and he ran his household based off discipline and structure, and which was, you know, not a good style growing up, to not a good family structure, dynamic, whatever you want to call it, to grow up in, because everyone is always on their tippy toes. Everybody's always on, you know, being cautious. Right? His mother, he loves his mother. His mother was an educator. His mother strived to teach the boys that education is important. She showed love, but she knew that in this world, education is something that someone cannot take away from you. Knowledge is something that someone cannot take away from you no matter what. And she strived her children to be educated and smart and make the best decisions, right? So the father was a hardworking man, Willard Smith, sir. He was a hardworking man. If you told him he couldn't do something, he's gonna prove you wrong. Like, he started his business, his ice business, from the bottom up. He was successful, but he ran a household really bad. He didn't run it with love. Like, it was always, you know, my way or the highway. And because of that, you know, the family suffered. So Will was the oldest sibling, outside of I believe it's Pam, his sister, right? So when Will was 9, he witnessed his father beating his mother, really bad, and Will did nothing to help his mom. And from that moment that Will Smith watched that brutal attack that his father did on his mother, he never recovered from it. Never recovered from it. Will calls himself a coward. He still thinks of himself as a coward because he did nothing to protect his love when he was the oldest one. And he felt like, you know, it was his fault, and, you know, that he should have saved his mom. His mom is still alive, by the way. He should have saved his mom. He should have did more, but instead he hid. Right? He did nothing to soothe his siblings, and, you know, he never recovered from that. So growing up, Will was the type of person who his imagination ran wild. And when I mean his imagination ran wild, he was always thinking, always, you know, always in his head. And people often mistook him to be a liar because his imagination was so big, you couldn't really construe what was fictional and what was non-fiction, right? So they used to call him a liar. Will got beat up, he got teased, you know, whatever you think that you know of Will Smith now, he was not that, and he is not that. So for Will, he's just like, you know, what can I do to protect my family? So Will was always loud. He was always boisterous. He was always the center of attention. So for him, the way that he protected himself and his family was by being funny. So being funny equaled, if I'm making my dad laugh, my family is safe. If I'm making the bullies laugh, I will not get beat up. Right? So being funny is a distraction defense mechanism in his book, so that it could equate to safety for himself and those around him. And for the most part, it worked. But when it didn't work, Will felt like a failure. He felt like he wasn't doing enough, and that's a big responsibility for a child to have. I also reading is just like, it was never really reassured into Will that nothing that happened with his mom, his dad, was his fault. You know, he consistently and continuously blames himself for things going wrong in the household. If he wasn't funny enough and his dad was upset, it was his fault. If he was getting beat up, he wasn't doing the best, his jokes wasn't the best, it was his fault, you know? And when his defense mechanism failed, you know, he went into, I want to say, like, it's not necessarily survival mode. He went into a mode in which it wasn't the best response for himself and others, because he grew up thinking that if things went wrong, it was always his fault. He was always the source of the problem because he did not do enough. And that is a big burden to carry as a 9-year-old child. You know that? And to me, honestly, I just didn't think his family did a good job of reassuring him and ultimately protecting his little mind. And it was truly hard to read that part of the book. He went through a hard childhood, but for the most part, he grew up in a decent home. He grew up in a family home. You know, his parents had jobs. He didn't really want for anything. He didn't want for nothing. He was, you know, he was hardworking. His family was hardworking, and they did the best that he could do. Will went to a predominantly white school in which there was only 3 other black kids. So, you know, while he was going to private school, the kids in the neighborhood, he grew up in Philly, was going to public school, right? So Will didn't get the what's the word that I'm looking for? Will got the best of both worlds, but he never fit in. You know, he didn't fit in with the white kids. They was racist against him. He didn't fit in with the neighborhood kids because they didn't see him as being black. They saw him as being white. He didn't fit in anywhere. So that was also another struggle for him. Will had no sense of belonging in either environment. Not home, not school, not in his community, nothing. So, you know, when you don't have a sense of belonging, you ultimately struggle with identity. Like, you can't pinpoint who you are because the structure, your community, your environment plays a role in your upbringing as well. So if you're not being accepted anywhere, how can you understand, like, who you truly are? You understand what I'm saying? So that was something that he struggled with as well, right? So, and he also overcompensated a lot. Like, Will overcompensated a lot in his life, and it was too much. It was just too much, right? So Will also had and still has an active imagination. His imagination took him far. It took him to who he is today, but it also made people think that he was a liar. So, like, a simple story he could tell, like, he went to the store and pick up some candy. He will exaggerate the story and be like, yo, I went to the store, pick up some candy. I met a nice shorty. Shorty gave me her number, da-da-da-da. Like, he would over-exaggerate, and people couldn't understand, like, you know, is he lying? Which part of the story is true? But that was just his active imagination going. And the only person who understood his imagination and how his mind was working was his mom. Like, she was a true supporter of Will and understood, like, you know, what was the truth in his story, what wasn't. But other people didn't really take time to understand Will, which is why they thought he was a liar. And that provided a false sense of hope with the people who interacted with Will, right? Will loved his grandmother. His grandmother was a source of love that really burned inside of him. So, and then for Will, like, he grew up with three discipline, right? Three things that he instilled into himself, which is love, and that's the love of God, which is discipline to keep some type of structure to obtain the things that you want, and education. Education will get you far. And education could be going to school or educating yourself, which is by reading and filling yourself with knowledge. His mother also always instilled in him that education and knowledge is something that someone cannot take away from you, right? So he grew up with those. That's his belief system. That's what we're gonna say. That's his belief system, right? So where can we go? So Will was and is a man that enjoyed words. He enjoyed rhyming. He enjoyed all these things. So he started rapping when hip hop was just getting good, and he equates that success as far as rapping and getting to hip hop to his cousin. I forgot his cousin's name. So that was that. I'm not gonna get into all the gritty details, right? Once he started getting into rap, you know, he hooked up with DJ Jazzy Jeff. When he hooked up, you know, they became the biggest boy group. Well, not really a boy group, like DJ and rapper together. Like, they was making money, like success was coming. You know, the girls started loving Will. Things was looking up, right? I should also say, whenever Will, I want to put it right. Whenever Will got the attention of a girl that he liked, he did too much. And Will always wanted to protect those around him. And because that was like a kind of goal or mission of his, he put too much effort. He was overprotective. He was overbearing, too much to deal with. And it was just a lot for the woman that he dealt with. And I was just like, I could see it. Like, he's trying to make up for the moment of not protecting his mom. So going through life, being with a girl, he loved super hard. He trusted super hard. He protected super hard. And that was overbearing for the woman that he dealt with. But he was always just trying to make up for something that he believes that he failed in. And I'm just like, that is a recipe for disaster. Like, it's never going to work. And he recognized that. Like, in his book, he recognized that along the way, right? So where we at? So that's the end of that note. So from rapping, Will ends up getting into acting, right? Because his rap career failed with his album. The third album, it just crumbled because him and Jazzy Jeff didn't take the recording session seriously. And when it was in the Bahamas, and they blew $300,000 and they rushed the album, his sales failed. So at one point he had moved to LA. He was living with a girl, was it Tina or something like that? And you know, Tina was just like, yo, get up and let's get your shit together, right? At the same time, he had his security guard Charlie Mack with him, right? To this day, him and Charlie Mack still tight. I guess Charlie Mack still runs the security detail. Anyways, Charlie Mack and Will went down to Alfonso, or whatever his name was, Arsenio Hall. There you go, Arsenio Hall studio, and in which, you know, Charlie Mack was the security guard that really gave Will the strength and confidence to keep pushing himself and do what he needs to do, right? Charlie Mack at the studio introduced Will to Benny Medina, right? Benny Medina was like, yo, it's good, Will, you know, they're chopping it up, right? Long story short, Benny Medina introduced Will to Quincy Jones. Quincy Jones puts Will on the spot at his birthday party to act, right? Will decides that he's gonna act out the script, whatever, and that's how he got chosen for the Fresh Prince to do Benny Medina's story, right? So for Will, performing equaled protection. And what that means is that when Will performed, he was able to put on a facet and be someone else so that no one was able to see the real him. He didn't know the real him. So for him, it was like he could hide behind the characters that he could play. He could hide behind his name. And he never had to truly face who he was, or no one had to see him for who he is. And I was just like, you know, it was never gonna work for him. Never gonna work for him, right? So from there, you know, early on in his career, Will struggled with separating himself and his characters. At one point, he did his movie that he did, the first movie that he did. I forgot what it was called. He played a character in which he, you know, the character pretends that he's going to a white family, something that broke down. He stays there, whatever. And from there, he was unable to separate the character from who he is. And at that time, he was married to Sherry Zampino, and his marriage with Sherry fell through because, you know, he was a different person. He couldn't get back to who he was. He couldn't even, at the same time, he's still filming The Fresh Prince, so he couldn't get into character he couldn't get back into Will Smith's character from The Fresh Prince because he was still stuck in that character. He struggled early on. And I was just like, you know, he didn't have any real guidance. Like, growing up, Will didn't have any real guidance. He had figures in his life, but no real guidance. And for a young man, that could be a recipe for disaster. For a young woman as well. As Will continued into his acting career, you know, his goal was to become the biggest movie actor of all time. And Will decided that the discipline that his father helped instill in him was that you have to outwork people. You have to keep working. Whatever someone is lacking, I'm going to do. I'm gonna work long hours. I'm gonna do what's necessary. At one point, like back when he was filming The Fresh Prince, Will memorized the script for his lines and the whole cast lines. I believe it was season 3, episode 5, where there was a scene with Will and Jazz, and you could see Jazz talking, but Will is mumbling Jazz's line. And then when it's Will's turn to say his line, he says his line, Jazz speaks, Will is mumbling Jazz's line. It was just like Will struggled with that because he used to do it a lot. He had to outbreak that habit. And you know, his work ethic is phenomenal. I would say that his work ethic is phenomenal, but he set himself up for failure. It's okay to work hard, but Will overworked, and that was just what his mind was on. It was just constantly work. And Will, for the most part, was selfish. He has a big heart, but he can be selfish. He will always put himself first. And not really think too much about others, but he was very empathic and he was very good at reading emotions. That him being able to read emotions is a part of what helped him survive as a child. He was able to read his father's different languages and body languages when he was in the home, to understand, like, you know, if my father moves a certain way, or if his eyebrows or his demeanor is different, you know, we in for a rude awakening type vibe, right? But also that caused some harm against him, because when he needed to read the emotions, he was unable to do so. And it failed, especially within himself, right? He just didn't know when to stop and to slow down. And that was a recipe for disaster, right? He also felt inferior to others around him who was of a high standard, but he was also good at learning. So for one, like with his relationship with Jada, and when Jada grew up with Tupac, you know, Will always equated that, you know, Jada's love for Tupac, he would never feel that, and he felt inferior to Tupac. Instead of being able to communicate his concerns with Jada and Tupac, he started moving in a different direction, and, you know, not speaking and feeling like, you know, he's not doing enough and feeling less than adequate, and that, you know, he struggled with self-awareness, he struggled with self-esteem, and that's because he didn't know himself, right? And then this notion that, you know, Jada is the reason why Will is acting out, and Will is emasculate. She emasculated Will. No, like, if you read his book, then you understand. Will was always like this growing up. He sought help, therapy. He sought psychedelic help, but for the most part, he never was able to deal with those struggles. Like, You know, at some point, Will kind of emasculated himself in a way, right? And at the end of the day, you know, Jada may play a role in certain ways that Will react, but at the same time, Will is a grown man. You get what I'm saying? And Will struggled with identity his whole life. So the way that he thinks is not conducive to his actions. And he never truly got the healing that he needed, right? And that's the problem that I see. You know, he's trying. Like, he throughout the book, you see that he's trying to go on healing journeys to learn himself, to understand himself. But at some point in time, Will never liked who he was or who he still is. You know, he struggled with, at one point he went to Trinidad and he struggled with being around, like, just being in the ocean, because he didn't know how to sit still. You know, he was always on the go. When you're always on the go, you never take a breather, and silence is something that he hated, right? So he never took time to just sit with himself and to really confront everything that he's been through and where he wants to go. And because doing that so will open up a door that he's not ready for. He's never been able to confront himself, his real demon, himself, the real barrier, himself. And because he never did that, no one can mess with that. No one can make you do anything because you haven't done the work to figure out who you are as an individual. And there was a point in time in the book, him and Jada had separated, and Will was having sex with other women. Will was doing his own thing. Like, Will did his own thing, Jada did his own thing. They have a different level of understanding that us people in the world, us outsiders, we will never understand. So for us to be judging their relationship, yeah, Jada puts their business out, Will puts their business out, but like they tell us and they say what we think. My bad, guys, the camera died. But anyways, Will and Jada tell the world what they want us to know, right? So for them, I feel like they sharing, but for us, we judging them based on what we think Jada is doing to Will, but we're not seeing that what Will is doing to himself, right? I feel like Will has done and is currently doing a disservice to himself, but not getting, what's the word I'm trying to look for? With his healing, from the book, like, he attempted to get healing, but I don't think that he really did the work, right? At one point, he went up to the cabin to do like what was it, like 14 days of self-isolation, no phones, no social media, no nothing, to be able to sit with himself. And he was unhappy. Like, he didn't want to be alone with himself, right? And he came to the realization, like, if I don't want to be alone with myself, why would someone want to be around me? You get what I'm saying? But he struggled with that, and it was just like from that on, he did some psychedelic ceremony to really get in tune with himself. But again, it was a start, but at what point, like, the ending, I don't think it did him any services, because he didn't really do the work, right? He attained all his goals, became one of the biggest movie stars in the world. He got the money, he got the family structure, you know, but he still wasn't happy. It wasn't enough for him. Will still wanted more. At one point, his children suffered. Like, when Willow dropped, You Rock My Hair Back and Forth, that song, right? She went on tour. There was a point in time where Willow was like, you know, this was fun, I did it, but I want to stop. I think she was like 10. Will was still trying to force her to, you know, you signed the contract, you agreed to obligations, still do it. And Willow was just like, so she said something along the lines like, you know, so my happiness doesn't matter, something like that, right? And you know, at some time he was just able to understand, like, yo, like, I'm telling you, I don't want to do something. You still trying to force me to do it. Does my happiness not matter? You know, and from then, you know, he started really taking his children and their position and his perspective into play and trying to be a better father. And I commend him for doing so. But it's just like, no one ever really stopped to ask Will, is he okay? Is he happy? It was just like, you know, people and their lives and livelihoods were dependent on Will's success. He's always trying to make people happy, always trying to put people in a position to better themselves. And you know, he was hurt a lot growing up as well. His security guard at one point, Charlie Mack, you know, him and Will was out, and Charlie Mack ended up telling Will, like, you know, he said this about you, hit him. So Will at one point went around punching and slapping people, and I was just like, that I didn't respect. Like, yo, what's really good with you? Like, you tripping, right? But Will, again, was a coward. He hit, even though he was going around hitting people, he still had the security that his Charlie Mack was going to be there to defend him. You know, without those people around him, Will was nothing. Like, in a sense to where, like, he would not do anything. He was still a person, but again, because he didn't know himself, you know, it's just like he can't stand on his own. He really learned how to fight when he was filming the Muhammad Ali movie, and that was the first time, you know, he would get knocked down, and he learned how to fight and defend himself, right? But still, he still felt inferior to those around him. You know, he just never felt complete, and I still think that he doesn't feel complete. I still think that Will is battling with himself and his inner demons, and no one around Will can really help him but himself. He has to do the work. But again, I said, like, this book, it gave a great insight to Will and who he was growing up, and in some way I feel empathetic towards him, in the sense that, you know, he dealt with a lot, and he didn't really get he had support from his family, but in my opinion, like, the support that he needed, it wasn't really given to him. And unfortunately, you know, until he really gets the healing that he needs, he's never going to be satisfied with his life. As far as his career, he is satisfied with that, but he's always striving to just keep going, you know. And for someone like that, you could crash and burn, and that's not a lifestyle that you wanna live. But I feel like his belief system growing up, and how he carried himself and his work ethic, it blinded him to the most important things around him, right? When it comes to his relationship with Jada, at one point in time, you know, Will believed that, you know, what he thinks for somebody is what they want that he should do, right? Like, for her 40th birthday party, she didn't like the 40th birthday party because he gave her something that she didn't want. Like, Jada is not the type of person that likes to be outgoing and around the little people. Like, she likes the little things in life. But for him, he likes to be around people. He likes to be around crowds. That's where he feels most safe and more comfortable. So he did what was technically best for him and not Jada. And he has a tendency of doing that. Like, and that's why I said that he can be very selfish in a way. Although he has a big heart, he's compassionate, it's still, the focus is still on him, what he needs. Although it's about the other person, is what he will need to be safe in that situation, even though he's doing it for another person. That's not healthy. That's not okay. That's why I say he's selfish. But all in all, the book was good. I would recommend reading the book. A lot of things that a lot of things that we think we know about Will, it's not what it seems to be. It's not what it is. Especially when it comes to his career and just learning, you know, getting an insight about his cognitive thought process. But anyways, if you read the book, right, drop in a comment. Let me know what you think about Will Smith's book. Let me know what you think about his life, his upbringing, and who he is today as a man. And let's get into it. Until next time, your girl is out.